Hello and welcome everyone here to Northwest Digital News and this joint broadcast with SMB Nation. This is Tech Tuesday here on our broadcast. You see Harry Brelsford pictured there coming into us live from Seattle. Kevin Hunter here at the broadcast desk and Kyle Torgerson across the way from me. Well, Harry, let's open up our Tech Tuesday with a little conversation about Paul Allen. You actually had an opportunity to meet him a couple of times. Just passed away October 15th. Share with us about Paul.
Yeah, well, again, everyone's experience is local, as it were, and so probably the highest level of engagement I had with him was at a celebration party one November election evening after the fine folks of Seattle voted for bond indentures to build what is now CenturyLink Stadium. I think, what was it called at one point? US West and then Quest, but you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
The new Kingdom, as it were.
Right.
And this was at Union Station, the old red brick railroad station in downtown Seattle, right by what would have been the Kingdom. And, it was surprisingly intimate. I mean, it was probably only a few dozen people at this election celebration, and shook Paul's hand and said congratulations. And more importantly, a lot of people know, but a lot of people don't know that he's quite an accomplished musician. So
I did not know that.
Yeah. So he was up on stage playing, guitar and bass and whatever he did, and quite good. And so he was literally leading the band, leading the parade. And I guess my recollection on that night was I really felt, and this is quite a while ago. I mean, what 20 years ago, some time ago. He had just bought the team from Ken Behring, a Los Angeles developer of mixed reputation, to put it kindly. You may recall they tried to move the Seahawks. And
yes, mixed reputation is very kind.
Yeah, so Paul Allen, stepped in as a good guy, right? A Seattle good guy billionaire, and this is before it was fashionable to be a billionaire. And bought the team, led the campaign to get the stadium co-funded, would be a fair way to put it. He put some money in. The city of Seattle put some money in, and we had the team. And then he led a jam session up on stage with music. And I guess the point I was trying to make is I really felt we were seeing the changing of the guard in Seattle on that evening to the young Microsoft wealth, and away from what would have been the older Seattle money. So names like the Piggott family that owned PACCAR, the trucking company,
right?
The Norton Laird Trust families that were basically behind Weyerhaeuser, right? So we had old money, still do. Still out there, the Bullitt family that has King 5, radio, but it felt like that evening we saw the transition into the Microsoft money, and indeed we did. So I'd say that was my most intimate engagement, and then the second one was at Asymmetrics. So this was a software company Paul started after leaving Microsoft. It was over in Bellevue. A friend of mine that I worked with went over there as a producer, but they made really snazzy screensavers. There used to be a thing called screensavers.
Yeah.
They
I remember those.
Yeah, and they cut deals with the Hollywood studios. My friend was commuting back and forth between, LA and Seattle. And so they had all the comic characters. Once 30 seconds of no activity, and all of a sudden your favorite comic character appears as a screensaver. So he was handling licensing, but a couple of thoughts. Again, this is early days when billionaires, that really meant something. And so, like Paul Allen had a few jets. He had like 17 cars. He had the house on Mercer Island. And my friend had access to that world. And maybe I'll end on the fact that he told me of, and this just shows Paul's character above all of everything that's being written today about his civic responsibility and his generosity. But apparently they took one of the, those high-speed catamarans from Seattle to Victoria, BC, down on the waterfront, and took the whole company up to Victoria, partied, and then came home. And Paul's a good guy. So that was my my interactions with him. How about yourself? Did you have any interactions or from afar?
I didn't have any direct interactions with him, but just aware of the things that the involvement that Paul Allen had specifically here in this area with regard to sports. Most people know that he owned Seattle Seahawks and the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah.
But a lot of people didn't know necessarily that he was a part owner of the Seattle Sounders, which joined Major League Soccer in 2009. They estimated his worth at time of death to be $20.3 billion, which makes him the 44th richest person in the world.
Yeah.
Who knows how to shred a guitar on the stage? We just found out.
Well, and maybe we end on just that I think. I'll give you an example. I had a conversation at Microsoft Ignite where we broadcast from a couple weeks ago in Orlando.
Right.
And a generally caustic and negative person on the East Coast was kind of like anti-West Coast technology billionaire. And I said, well, no, wait a minute. I said, Paul Allen, Bill Gates, they've been incredibly generous with their wealth. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll kind of end on that note that, boy, that Paul Allen, he really made Seattle, man.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, let's visit a little bit about Constant Contact as well. There's some new things going on there. Bring us up to date, Harry.
Yeah, I'm about to head down to the airport. I'm in downtown Seattle at one of these co-worker spaces working for a few hours. Then I'm going to hop the late flight to Boston. And I have a meeting tomorrow at lunch with Constant Contact. It's yet another meeting in a series of meetings. And what's interesting is my activities with them relate specifically to, the computer guy, the IT pro, the partners who might like to use Constant Contact to get more business. But it's a broader conversation because Constant Contact can be used by any business. And what a lot of people don't know is we did a webinar recently over at SMB Nation, and Constant Contact took complete ownership that they got comfortable. They got about a 10-year head start on MailChimp and some of the other solutions.
Right.
And this tends to happen. You get comfortable. And so they did a complete recode, a complete rewrite in about 2015, 16. And it's more than that. So not only does the art now line up in your newsletter and all that, right? Because I used to struggle with some of the wonkiness of old Constant Contact. So they recoded their entire code base. And then, in my humble opinion, they're starting to look more and more like GoDaddy. Okay. So everyone thinks Constant Contact email, true. But for example, Constant Contact has a domain registration program. They bought register.com. And they have other acquisitions. And that's what I'm meeting with them in Boston about is I'm kind of like, we need to help get that story out to my native community of SMB partners, IT pros. But again, Kevin and Kyle, it's a bigger story, right? Because it relates to the audience you have. It relates to businesses. And, let me pose the rhetorical question to you, but, did you know Constant Contact has all this going on?
Well, I've been aware of Constant Contact for a long time, and a number of organizations that have used it I've been involved with. I haven't been a user of Constant Contact myself because I haven't had a need of using this type of email service, but no, the answer to your question is no. I didn't know these things were developing currently with them.
Yeah, and one of the things, and again, folks, if you so desire, you could pop over at your leisure to the YouTube channel SMB Nation and find the Constant Contact presentation. But to summarize that would be that they have really good templates and auto building capabilities. So, for example, if you put in your domain URL inside a tool that's helping you build a branded email template, it goes and it uses, I hate to say artificial intelligence, but it uses intelligence to grab your corporate logo, grab the About Us, grab some basic stuff, and start to build out your template automatically. So it's like telemagic.
Right. Right.
And it's just little things like that that they're investing in, where we concluded the webinar to my audience by saying, guys, give them a fair shake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Constant Contact has no branding problems or recognition problems. It's more that people may have had a tired legacy experience with Constant Contact. And, Kevin, I'll be happy to report back, but tomorrow is yet another step in that journey, because we're thinking in 2019 maybe we can help tell the Constant Contact story a little bit better to both your audience and mine, quite frankly.
Exactly. Well, 600,000 plus customers they boast on their site. That's not chump change. So they've done a lot of things well. And you mentioned earlier about getting comfortable. That a little thought that popped in the back of my mind is, it's not a good idea for anybody really to get comfortable in business these days. We saw a filing from longtime Sears and Roebuck's for bankruptcy on Monday. That's called getting really comfortable in who you are. And so,
well,
anyway.
let's talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind. And
sure.
If you want to screen pop over to my LinkedIn profile, I did a piece yesterday about Sears and Roebuck, just a couple hundred words, my own attitude.
Gotcha.
And basically what I was saying, and this is a good topic, because as an entrepreneur, and many in your audience are business owners and entrepreneurs, I basically lay out over a few hundred words that, your toughest critics are your friends and family, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing like the tough love of a family and the Thanksgiving dinner. And so on the other side of the aisle, my extended family from Chicago, where Sears Roebuck was HQ'd and all that, was I still think they think I've been unemployed for between 20 and 30 years as an entrepreneur. And why didn't I just take a job at Sears Roebuck and I'd be getting my gold watch by now?
There you go.
Be a humble servant. And
yep.
Yesterday was kind of my day. In the piece, I basically say, well, today is my day because I'm still here as an entrepreneur, right? I'm scrappy. I'm transforming. I'm fighting every day. And, Kevin, for whatever reason, Sears Roebuck just, what am I trying to, gave up, quit, got tired. I don't know what the heck happened.
You know what I was sharing on yesterday's broadcast, Harry, that, well, the connection between Sears and Kmart. And I was actually in college in a marketing program in Northwood University in Detroit, Michigan, in their Troy campus. And that is where I believe it's the world headquarters, if not the main headquarters of Kmart is located there in Troy. And so because of the close proximity of the university, they brought over the executive team from Kmart and showed this big K with the Mart going down the leg and how they thought this rebranding was going to change the decline of the organization. And as university students, we went out and looked at a bunch of their stores in the Detroit area and came back and did our assessment on what they needed to change. And so everything from just poor presentation of merchandise to, a lot of broken shelving in the store to busted up tiles on the floor to everything about the store said cheap. And, it's and nothing in there had like an appealing retail a retail appeal to a customer. And so we came back with that to them, and their attitude to us was basically, well, this is why we're paid the big bucks, because we make these decisions and you university students don't know what you're talking about. Well, as it turns out, I guess we did know what we were talking about.
Hey, Kyle, I don't know if you can bring up, if you scroll down my blog over there, but there's a chart in my article from Tiffany Bova, who's a former Gartner analyst and now an executive at Salesforce. So if hopefully it appears, it should be.
You have to scroll down, Kyle.
Further down in the blog. I just want to give a shout out to Tiffany.
There it is.
Yep. There we go. Folks, again, if you want to ping me up on LinkedIn and click through to this piece, but more importantly, Tiffany did one of these, what do we want to call this? One of these Insta charts.
Yeah.
and did a really good job of kind of bringing it all together. And so what I say in the blog is, I'm not going to tell that story. Here's Tiffany's link. Here's Tiffany's chart. If you want to, if you want to have that conversation about the story of Sears Roebuck, have a party. I'm not going to repeat that. I was just getting in a much more personal level that my relatives on the other side of the aisle are going to have to find another company that I should have gone to work for.
Right.
And not been an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
And hopefully they're not reading it or listening to this show.
There you go.
Sorry to take a turn on you, but you bring up a really good topic with Sears Roebuck. It's certainly very timely.
Exactly. Well, let's have some conversation about a new event that's coming up in Montreal. I'm assuming after your trip to Boston, are you headed to SherWeb Accelerate in Montreal?
Yeah, I am. So what I'm doing is I am driving. I like to drive, and I'm going to drive from Boston to Montreal, 6 hours. I have my camera. I'm going to take some photos of the leaves, and just quite frankly, work and play. I mean, that's my payoff as an entrepreneur, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've earned the right to have fun at what I do, and I'm going to spend Saturday in Stowe, Vermont on the way home, yada, yada, yada. But let's talk about Accelerate in Montreal. So this is a Canadian company that's surprisingly successful in the U.S. market. They are what we would call a hoster for the purposes of today's show. So maybe, you're familiar with web hosters and Exchange email hosters. They're a little bit more than that. But what I really wanted to highlight is if folks, and you can Google SherWeb Accelerate. But on day 2, they have some of the non-company speakers. My friend and yours, Carl Palachuk, a real go-getter in our space.
Exactly.
Is giving a speech, and the 26, I believe it's 26 tips to be successful in a business and so on. And the point I want to raise is Carl's branded the speech as, the 26 tips to run a successful managed services provider business, which is a long-handed way of saying IT pro or computer guy. But these 26 steps apply to any small business owner, right? The topics, there's another one in the afternoon that speaks towards how to enter a vertical market.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kevin and Kyle, that's generic, right?
Right.
It just happens to be at a technology conference with IT pros and MSPs and partners. But Carl and this other individual, their respective speeches, jeez, man, they could go to any small business conference and give that speech. And that's kind of what I wanted to emphasize, was just that I like the fact that these technology conferences are now having business speeches, business speeches, and not just bits and bytes, right?
Right.
So that's
how far back do you and Carl go? I noticed that Carl has been regarded as an IT consultant since 1995. When we think about when computers and networks were actually getting started in business. I was in a manufacturing plant in 1986, and for the first time, there wasn't desktops yet then, but for the first time, they brought in a computer that was going to help do the accounting. Everything had been done by paper then. So when I think back 1995, people say, well, that's relatively recent in so-called modern history, but in the world of tech, that's like back on the Stone Ages almost.
Well, so I'll answer your question on Carl, but let's frame up the timeline that's exactly where we're at with analytics and big data and some of the things we've talked about in passing on this show, Power BI on one of our shows. We are in 1995, and it's often hard for people to realize that. I used to ask my older brothers, I'm the youngest of 5, and my oldest brother was a college student in 1968, not to age myself, but there's a fair gap between us. And maybe I was a bonus baby, I don't know. But the point is, I asked him, in 1968, I mean, did you know it was 1968 at the time? You're 18 years old. There's a thing called Woodstock. Did you guys sit around and say, wow, this is 1968? And the answer is, no, right? You don't know you're in an epoch or an era until the era passes, right? And then you look back and you go, wow, that was 1968. And I think that's, to your point, that's kind of what the mid 90s were, right?
Exactly.
When it was very young, and you don't really appreciate it till later. And I'm just raising my hand and saying, people, that's right where we're at with analytics. Okay. just take a half step back, back away from those laptops for a minute.
Exactly.
And just realize we are in that era that you're going to talk about in 20 years. And you're going to say, man, do you remember the early days? To answer your question about Carl, we met, I would offer 2004 and 5. I was kicking out some of my early books, and we met and talked about, I helped him become an author. So we became a self-publishing entity at that point. It was, when you first could self-publish, and a little company called Amazon would sell your books and take a 55% cut.
Exactly.
And we became a publisher, and we distributed Carl's first books, and then he's gone on to fly further and faster. Super good guy, as you'll recall.
Well, that certainly kicked off something that obviously was a part of a passion for Carl, because 17 books later.
Yeah. Exactly.
How many books have you authored, Harry? You have quite a few in your on your resume, don't you? How many books have you written?
Well, yeah, I did 20. Now, the dirty little secret is a lot of those, and Carl included, is we team up with other authors. So when I say 20 books, there was one book on internet commerce. I was the lead author, but there were 3 other authors. So guys, I probably only wrote 100 pages, to be honest. But you still call it a book, right? You still got to count.
That's right. Well, so what are you hoping to get out of SherWeb Accelerate in Montreal? Quick snapshot on the conference.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's more for the traditional SMB Nation MSP partner audience, but I think the thing I really want to take away is clarification. So Microsoft is yet again changing the rules for its resellers. So the analogy would be, if you had a Ford Motor dealership or Chevy dealership in Bremerton, Washington, and you go to, an event to learn what the new rebates are and the financing terms and that kind of thing, SherWeb is going to hit that head on. And, in general, the trend line is Microsoft is being less generous to the reseller community. So you're starting to see that kind of dissension that you often hear with McDonald's franchise owners and Chevy dealers. It's a natural act, right? There's a little bit of an adversarial relationship between McDonald's and their franchise holders in terms of pricing and menus. We're starting to see that because it's a mature market. So that's what I hope to take away, is what are the new rules of engagement.
Fantastic. Well, thanks as all, Harry, joining us here on a Tech Tuesday. I know you're busy. You got to get ready for your flight headed off to Boston, but thanks for taking time out of your day to join us here on Northwest Digital News.
All right.
For everybody joining us on Patreon, on Twitch TV, YouTube, Facebook, thanks for joining us here. As always, I'm Kevin Hunter with Kyle Torgerson and Harry Brelsford out of SMB Nation.
All right. Have a nice day.
Next time.